Single dad bought an abandoned farmhouse, returned weeks later, and found two women living inside. He hadn't even unlocked the front door when he felt it, that quiet, unsettling sense that something had changed. The old farmhouse stood in the pale afternoon light, no longer looking abandoned. Fresh curtains moved gently behind the dusty windows. A thin line of smoke curled from the chimney. And as Daniel Mercer stepped onto the creaking wooden porch, the sound of footsteps echoed from inside the house he had bought with his last savings. He pushed the door open, heart pounding, only to find two women standing in the living room, staring back at him as if he were the intruder. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Hub Tale. Your support keeps these heartfelt stories alive. Daniel hadn't planned for his life to look like this at 38, alone, raising his 8-year-old son Caleb after losing his wife, Emma, to a sudden illness. The city apartment they once shared had become too heavy with memories, too expensive for a single income, and too small for a grieving father trying to rebuild. When Daniel found the listing for an abandoned farmhouse miles away from the noise and reminders, it felt like destiny. The photos showed cracked paint, broken fences, and overgrown fields, but Daniel saw potential. He saw space for Caleb to run, soil to plant fresh beginnings, and silence that might finally soothe the ache in his chest. He poured every dollar he had into buying that forgotten property. The farmhouse had been empty for years, neighbors said. No electricity, no water, no life. Daniel promised Caleb they would fix it together over the summer. But first, he needed to stay in the city a few more weeks to wrap up his construction contracts before they moved permanently. He locked the farmhouse tightly the day he left, the echo of the empty rooms following him down the dirt road. Weeks later, standing inside the living room that now smelled faintly of soap and cooked rice, Daniel felt a mix of confusion and fear. The two women looked to be in their mid-20s, identical in appearance, with long blonde hair tied back in simple ponytails. They wore plain white blouses and dark skirts, their faces pale but composed. The furniture he had left covered in dusty sheets was now uncovered. The windows were clean. A small vase of wildflowers sat on the cracked wooden table. Shock quickly turned into frustration. This was the one thing he had managed to claim for himself and his son, and now strangers were living in it. His voice trembled as he demanded to know who they were and why they were inside his home. The taller of the two women swallowed hard before explaining that their names were Clara and Elise. They had nowhere else to go. Their story unfolded slowly, heavy with exhaustion. They had been working at a nearby factory that suddenly shut down without notice. With no family left and no savings, they had drifted from couch to couch until there was no couch left. They found the farmhouse while walking along the back roads, searching for a place to rest for a single night. They believed it was truly abandoned. The door's old lock had given way easily. They never meant to steal or damage anything. They only wanted shelter from the cold spring rains. Daniel's anger didn't vanish immediately. He thought about Caleb, about promises made. He thought about how hard he had worked for this place. But then he noticed the subtle details. The repaired hinge on the kitchen cabinet, the floor swept clean, the broken window patched with care. These women hadn't trashed the house. They had revived it. Over the next hour, Daniel learned more. Clara had once studied agriculture before financial hardship forced her to drop out. Elise loved baking and had dreamed of opening a small roadside cafe. They had spent the past weeks clearing weeds from the backyard and fixing sections of the fence using scraps they found in the barn. They weren't squatting in carelessness. They were surviving with dignity. Daniel drove back to the city that evening with his thoughts louder than the engine. He barely slept. Caleb's innocent excitement about the farm echoed in his mind, but so did the memory of Clara's trembling hands and Elise's hopeful eyes. Daniel knew what it felt like to lose stability overnight. He remembered hospital bills stacking up, the loneliness of sitting beside Emma's empty hospital bed. He understood desperation. When he returned to the farmhouse 2 days later, he didn't come with police or threats. He came with a proposal that surprised even himself. The farm was too big for one man and a child to manage alone. The fields needed tending, the house needed repairs, and Caleb needed community. He offered Clara and Elise a chance to stay legally, to help restore the farm in exchange for a place to live and shared responsibility. The transformation that followed was slow but remarkable. Daniel worked long days repairing the roof and rebuilding the porch while Clara carefully planned vegetable rows across the once-neglected land. Elise experimented in the kitchen, turning fresh eggs and milk from a neighbor's cows into bread and simple pastries. Caleb, who had been withdrawn since his mother's passing, began to laugh again as he chased chickens and learned how to plant seeds. Challenges didn't disappear. Money was tight. Storms damaged crops. There were nights when Daniel questioned his decision, when exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders. But each time doubt crept in, he would see Clara patiently teaching Caleb how to water seedlings or Elise